from MUN Club the ample assurance that the quality of debate and discussion will be high. We will also be looking forward to the resolutions you would eventually come up with and pass as a council. So with that, I wish you all the best for the conference and up and on.
Thank you, Nicole. Now, the chairs will introduce themselves and their topics. First off, we have the Security Council, chaired by Mr. Keithan Arularasan and Mr. Keith Lim.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Keith, and this is Keithan, and we are the chairs of the UNSC. So the first question is, what is the UNSC? The United Nations Security Council, also known as the UNSC, is one of the 6 principal organs of the United Nations and is charged with the maintenance of international peace and security. And unlike other committees, the SC is the only council that has legally binding resolutions. The UN Charter authorizes the SC to investigate any situation threatening international peace. It can recommend procedures for peaceful resolution of a dispute, impose sanctions, if needed, and force its decision through the use of military power or by any means necessary. Our topic today is the threat of ISIS, and rather than another boring paragraph on what ISIS is, here is a video to introduce our topic.
Oh dear, just when you thought the Iraq problem was solved because you hadn't heard about it for a while, everything's back to murderous chaos and terror. What happened? In 2003, the US invaded Iraq because of its alleged connections to terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. At the time, Saddam Hussein, a brutal dictator, ruled the country. He was part of the Sunni minority and suppressed the Shia majority. Iraq was conquered fairly quickly, but the US had no plan for the country. The until then suppressed Shia majority took over and began oppressing the Sunnis because suppressing other faiths has proven to be such a good idea. Unsurprisingly, a Sunni rebel uprising began, and terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda trickled into Iraq, and local forces, often former Sunni military, began fighting the US troops and the newly formed Iraqi state, peaking in a bloody civil war in 2006. Since then, people in Iraq have basically been segregated by religion. So, in a tragic irony of history, the US invasion led to the formation of the very terrorists the US wanted to eliminate in the first place, because Iraq was now the perfect training ground for terrorism. To understand this complicated conflict better, we need to understand the relationship between the 2 main branches of the Muslim faith, Shia and Sunni Islam. Sunnis make up about 80% of the Muslim world, and Shia about 20%. And the hardliners on both sides don't like each other very much. Saudi Arabia and Iran are the 2 most powerful players in the game of faiths. They both have no separation of state and religion and domestic problems and a lot of oil money. And they support groups that fight the other religious orientation. And one of those terror organizations supported by Saudi Arabia was the Islamic State in Iraq, or ISI for short. In 2010, the Arab Spring happened and changed the whole situation in the Middle East. In Syria, dictator Bashir al-Assad didn't think much of resigning and started a gruesome civil war against his own people. The longer the war went on, the more foreign groups joined the fight, most of them for religious reasons and with the goal of building an Islamic State in the region. And one of them was the infamous ISI, which now became the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, or ISIS. They had fought in Iraq for years and had thousands of well-trained and fanatic soldiers. They already quasi-controlled parts of northern Iraq and were very determined to build their religious state. And they changed the game in Syria like no one expected. ISIS was so unbelievably violent and radical that soon it was at war with almost every other faction of the Syrian rebel armies. They attacked and killed members of other Muslim terrorist groups. In the territories they controlled, they built an Islamic State with rules so strict that even the hardliners of Al-Qaeda and Saudi Arabia were shocked and withdrew their support. ISIS has been accused of responsibility for multiple massacres against civilians, countless suicide bombings, the hostage-taking of women and children, the execution of their prisoners, and beheadings. All kinds of medieval horrors we would rather not have to illustrate. And this lovely gathering of human beings recently decided it was time to take more territory in Iraq. Since the US left Iraq, the Shia Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki has monopolized power and discriminated against Sunnis wherever possible. The government of Iraq is widely regarded as being corrupt, incapable, and it's certainly hated by a large part of its citizens. The Iraqi army, consisting of about 300,000 soldiers, was created using $25 billion in tax money, but it's not loyal to its government and has been withdrawing or completely disbanding, giving up city after city. Because ISIS has announced that everyone who opposes them will be killed, they have proven they mean business. By June 2014, they'd conquered a big chunk of Iraq, including Mosul, Iraq's second largest city. They'd stolen hundreds of millions from captured banks, making them the richest terror organization on earth. And they are constantly working on establishing a super-medieval religious state. Iran and the US are even considering working together to fight them. That's how gruesome the situation is. Events in Iraq show again that exploiting the people you defeated in a war, denying them power, a living and a stake in the rebuilding of the country, is just sowing the seeds of the next bout of violence. Somehow, we have to break this circle.
So that now you understand the threat of ISIS, we are looking forward to hear the heated debate to resolve this issue. Thank you.
Next up, the chairs from the Special Political and Decolonization Committee, Mr. Joshua Ang and Mr. Peter Look.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Joshua.
And I am Peter, and we are the chairs of the Special Political and Decolonization Committee, or SPECPOL for short. SPECPOL is the fourth United Nations General Assembly, or fourth committee of the United Nations General Assembly. In the past, SPECPOL dealt with decolonization. Today, the committee handles issues ranging from the Palestinian refugee problem to atomic radiation, and of course, outer space, the topic we will be discussing at this very conference.
Specifically, our council will be deliberating the commercialization and militarization of space. In the modern era, space activities have become closely intertwined in our daily lives. Google Maps, YouTube, Twitter, and Korean drama. Without the commercialization of space, we would not have ready access to all these things. At the same time, we see a potential arms race in outer space, as nations develop weapons to gain advantage in this new frontier. We may not see a Death Star or a USS Enterprise in the near future, but this is a topic that nevertheless moves into greater prominence as we progress further into the 21st century.
The following video will focus on international efforts to resolve the problem of space debris, as a microcosm of the wider array of issues we hope will be discussed by the SPECPOL delegates.
Space flights. In the pioneering days, it was mainly a matter of national prestige. Technological progress was driven by the wish to be the first. The space race resulted in an impressive number of launches, especially when it came to military reconnaissance and communication satellites. Today, commercial and scientific applications dominate in spaceflight. We have now become accustomed to many services provided from space in our daily lives. Communications, weather forecasts, television, remote sensing of the environment and navigation. Our activities in space have left traces behind. To date, there have been some 5,000 successful satellite launches, and certain orbits are at risk of becoming congested. Before the active removal of objects can start, there are a number of legal issues to resolve. According to international space law, the responsibility for any debris object or abandoned satellite remains with the owner, even though it is no longer functional. All risks associated with the mission are therefore the responsibility of the owner of the service vehicle and the owner of the target object. The selection of the target objects concerns all major spacefaring nations. Active removal measures must therefore rely on an international consensus. The technical and legal challenges must be overcome now. The active removal of space objects will only become commercially viable after a certain time. Nevertheless, the initial steps need to be taken soon in order to effectively stabilize the situation in space. Active removal remains the only option for ensuring that spaceflight under current conditions will remain possible in the future.
As chairs, we hope to see stellar performance by our delegates. Thank you.
Up next, from the Social, Humanitarian and Cultural Affairs Committee, Ms. Anne Wee and Ms. Li Jiaxin.
Good evening, delegates. We are the chairs for the Social, Humanitarian and Cultural Affairs Committee. I'm Jiaxin and this is Anne. SOCHUM acts as an organ for the United Nations and helps in policy making through multilateral discussions on a range of issues. The primary aim of our committee is to promote the implementation of cultural, social, and human rights. And that brings us to our topic today, child labor.
The number of child laborers worldwide remains high today, with an estimated 150 million children being engaged in the child labor trade. High poverty levels, the violation of existing laws, as well as inadequate international laws and enforcement are only three of the many reasons why this situation continues as it is today. As such, this council would thus like all delegates to play the role of a voice to these voiceless individuals and come up with a proper resolution to sufficiently alleviate the child labor cases around the world, as well as defend their rights. And in lieu of these issues, we will now be showing you a video on our topic to give you a better understanding of the challenges that these children face on a day-to-day basis.
Early every morning, Parity pulls a cart through town hauling water for neighbors. When it's full, the tank weighs about 450 pounds. After doing morning chores, the hardest part of her day begins. Instead of going to school, she goes to work in a brick factory all day long. It's hard, tedious work, often in temperatures above 35 degrees. Each family gets paid by the number of bricks they load. Parity's mom is getting older and weaker, so she needs Parity and her sister to help.
I wish I could go to school, but I need to make money to buy food for my family.
When Parity's father got very sick 5 years ago, he eventually passed away, and she was left with a mountain of debt and 4 girls to raise. So they came to the brick factory 3 years ago, and Parity went to work to help them survive.
I don't know what to do. I just want my daughter to be able to go to school and to be educated so she doesn't have to work in the brick factory like me.
Parity dreams of becoming a teacher, but if she can't go to school, that's impossible.
I'm afraid that I won't be able to work enough. We owe other people lots of money. I work from 6 in the morning until 6 at night, but we still don't have enough food.
It's hard to believe the weight of worry on this tiny girl's shoulders.
for your attention. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to a fruitful debate session.
Now, from the Human Rights Council, Ms. Megha Zaha and Mr. Lee Ryan Zulkifli.